It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, and we have arrived back a little bit too early. I would have liked the weekend to continue. I don't know about you, but we are talking real estate news and property on another Monday morning, start of our working week, and we are into December, the second day of December today for 2024. Interestingly, regional housing markets, they are outperforming Australia's capital cities, with Queensland and Western Australia leading the charge. I don't think there's probably too much surprise in this, but a recent CoreLogic regional market update found dwelling values in regional areas rose 1.1% over the 3 months to October, exceeding the 0.8% growth recorded in capital cities. Now, who are the star performers and where are their locations regionally? Mackay, that topped the list on the positive side of 8.3%, Geraldton 8.2%, and Townsville, which Margaret Lomas picked as her top choice to look at for 2024, that was up 6.6%. Regional rents also increased 0.5%, with Kalgoorlie Boulder recording the highest rental yield at 8.8%. So some interesting numbers coming through there on our Monday morning. And let's welcome in Simon Kuestenmacher. Haven't spoken to Simon for a while, and a very good morning and welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast, Simon.
It's good to be back on.
Now, a few weeks ago, I was talking to Nicola Powell from Domain about Brisbane, since we are talking about Queensland. She was talking about those house prices having risen for the seventh consecutive quarter by almost $15,000 or 1.5%. We are nearly at $1 million on that house median price for Brisbane.
I know, what a milestone, hey? Only another, just over $5,000 and Brisbane will hit the $1 million median house price club. And that is likely to occur by the end of this calendar year. And it is such a significant milestone. It's a psychological hurdle for buyers when you hit that $1 million median house price. We've got a bit of momentum loss though. Prices are rising. They're just not rising as fast as they were. But, Brisbane is one of the three capital cities that really is a standout performer and continues to see growth.
Yeah, it looks like, if you want to live anywhere, Simon, Queensland is the place, and that psychological barrier that she talks about, $1 million, very, very close now in Brisbane.
It is. It's inching that way. And of course, that means that a certain level of attractiveness for interstate migrants is gone, because part of the argument was always in Queensland, you do get more sun and you do get cheaper housing. And now you still get the sun, but you don't get cheaper housing unless you move from New South Wales, because Sydney prices are still much higher than they are in Brisbane. But all the other state capitals, they have essentially gained more attractiveness for residents compared to Brisbane.
Yeah, and, when it comes to making houses a little bit more affordable, there's this thinking that the demographic of politics could be kind of getting in the way of making some good policy. For example, politicians, are they really interested in making housing more affordable at the end of the day with policy? And you've got some thoughts on that.
Exactly. My argument is that if we imagined a purely hypothetical, cynical, self-interested politician, they have no reason to make housing more affordable, to be honest. Because if you wanted to make housing more affordable, this would mean that you would want to lower or freeze house prices. And still we are in a situation where 3/4 of the voters live in a house that they own or pay a mortgage on. So you only have 1/4 of the voters that are renters and that potentially want to become homeowners. You can't say, though, as a politician, well, let's forget about those pesky renters. We don't need to worry about you. You still need to pay lip service, and you then ultimately need to come up with policies that look like they might make housing more affordable, but they do the opposite. This is, if I look at a first home buyer grant, you give tens of thousands of dollars to a first home buyer, and then you tell them, yeah, please don't tell the market that you have this additional money, because otherwise the market factors it in. It's a dumb policy. Every economist in the country knows this, that it only drives up house prices. It's a waste of public funding. The only policy that is dumber is super for your housing, because it doesn't waste your own housing, public money to drive up house prices, but it wastes your own superannuation savings to drive up house prices. But again, they sound good on the surface that you tackle housing affordability, but they do the exact opposite.
Yeah, and what about the under 40s? Do they really care, do you think, about the two main political parties?
Everyone under the age of 40 despises the two major parties. They have zero party loyalty. They have no partisanship. It means they actually don't identify with either of the parties. They're very cynical about politicians. So the two major parties are very much at the severe risk of, in the long term, navigating themselves out of relevance. It's quite likely that in about 4 elections, the share of overall votes that go to a Labour or Liberal party could halve. And that, of course, completely shifts the political landscape, because we are moving away from a two-party system. We're increasingly moving into a more divided political spectrum where the balance of power sits with the third parties. And it's a big strategic mistake by both major parties that I'm making out. And it largely comes on the back of wannabe homeowners and renters.
All right, so yeah, that's the state of the play. When we come back, I want to throw this question up to you, Simon, and that is going to be whether or not a new political party would get any traction if they were called the Affordable Political Party and the Homeless Party. We'll talk about that next.
From powerful and up-to-date news to professional real estate experts with the latest property trends on the Real Estate Podcast.
And right now, it's time for another 30-second property tip. We are going back to the Sunshine Coast and to Hamish in Mooloolaba. Good morning, Hamish. What have you got for us?
I guess today, Craig, I'd like to sort of talk to auction tactics for buyers. We've got more and more auctions happening on the Sunshine Coast, and some people aren't that experienced with them. In Queensland, we're not allowed to quote prices or price guides as they are allowed in southern states. But what we sort of suggest to most people to be successful in an auction, and 60% of people that are successful, the first bidder of an auction, is just bid early and make sure that your increments are nice and strong, so you're not sort of giving away your end point in your auction tactic.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day, from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
And it is a Real Estate Monday, and we're talking all things property with Simon Kuestenmacher this morning, and politics this morning too. And what do you think about that idea that there could be a political party that launched itself on behalf of people trying to buy cheap, more affordable properties, along with the homelessness, which is such a growing problem?
I would say that such a party would have quite a bit of traction, because quite often you see new parties emerge on a single issue, which would be the single biggest pressing issue. And for many renters and low-income earners, homeless people, this would be the most pressing issue. So that would work. And this new party would, of course, actually jeopardize votes away from the Greens and the Teals, because these are the two parties who are most vocally protecting, defending the rights of renters. If you will. They poll very highly. So that is a right approach. And I would actually expect in the next 10 years or so, new parties to emerge in Australia. So this is a very, very real prospect, whether it will be just a housing-related party or whether there will be a slightly broader appeal to it. But I would actually see this as very likely for such a thing to develop.
If you're listening to the podcast and you're saying, gee, I'd really like to get into politics, then why not? You know, you've got nothing to lose, perhaps everything to gain. Now, talking about the gains, the pluses and the minuses, I want to talk to you about cars and cars in cities. Because when you look around the country, there is all of this talk about the public transport sector. You know, it's improving the lives. People should be using more public transport than ever, leaving the cars behind. Is this decade, do you think, more important than many other decades when it comes to public transport and how many cars people are using?
Yeah, so I fully appreciate all the efforts of Sydney and Melbourne in particular to install new public transport infrastructure. Brisbane is doing the same. But that said, we must not fool ourselves to think that we will take pressure away from the road system, because demographically speaking, we are facing the most intense car decade in Australian history. Not only do we see strong population growth, and a certain share of those people will, of course, be driving, but we are pushing our cities further out and out. We put larger population cohorts on the fringe of town. It's the millennial generation now that moves to the fringe as they start families. And there is a certain cyclical nature to car usership. You start in a household where mom and dad have a car, maybe they have two cars, and when you're 18, 19, you're still at home, but you become a car driver. So the households then have 3 cars. But all of a sudden, you move out of the parental home into your first apartments, and you partner up. You usually get away with 1 car per household in your 20s. But then once you hit your 30s and you move into the family formation stage, you do use multiple cars per household. In the last decade, we had the biggest generation ever, the millennials, in the 1 car per household phase. We are now, bit by bit, pushing them into the multiple cars per household phase of the life cycle. Millennials will buy cars at record numbers. That, of course, pushes more cars on the roads. And, of course, on the other end of the age spectrum, baby boomers for the next decade are still too young, too healthy, too active to give up driving. In about 10 years' time, boomers will give up driving, but not for now.
Yeah, that's interesting. And if you look at the developers, of course, they've got to try and, I guess, please the millennials when it comes to what they're building, because they do have this insatiable appetite for vehicles.
Indeed, and just the realistic situation of a family setup is that you, especially if you live on the urban fringe, you do need 2 cars. And that means, just imagine a potential apartment complex where you need 2 car parks per household. That becomes very difficult to manage. So therefore, I would say that the sheer life cycle logic also dictates that the infill development goals that all of our big cities have, where 70 to 80% of new builds are meant to be infill, that they will be missed by a big margin. We will see more and more greenfield sites developing. We will see the urban sprawl continuing. Of course, population grows much faster than we add infrastructure. And that means it's car-dependent transport that happens on the urban fringe. Family-sized homes, separate home type products here. Cars, cars, cars. The hope for the environment is that you encourage electric vehicles, that you build the right charging infrastructure into the houses, as you build them and so forth. But that remains to be seen.
All right, Simon, will you enjoy your Monday? Thank you so much for coming back on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
My pleasure.
Explore new property destinations where you could live with exclusive interviews covering real estate news and market insights.
You're not wrong. A lot of agencies do just leave you to your own devices and say, well, here's a database, get calling. You should still have set parameters and guides and help with feedback as well as help with campaigns to manage and run.
It's lax laws, it's loopholes that squatters are taking advantage of. And then in the process, I learned about something called deed fraud, which is a very insidious crime that's growing in popularity.
Luckily enough, I married my personal assistant, so my husband is my executive PA.
There's still a big focus. So when I say growth corridors, it's the southeast out towards Pakenham or out towards Melton. If you can get a bite-sized industrial factory out there in those areas, I think over the long term, you'll always have a tenant.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.